so the title that we had for tonight is it okay to want things? Okay, desire versus selflessness in Judaism. And a little bit of an interesting title. I'm not sure exactly why I picked it, but I think it's because I think a lot of people, I suspect some people have this impression that when they heard religion, and generally they think an ideal religious person, he doesn't have desires. They don't want money, they don't want comfort, they don't want recognition, they don't want covet, the desire. They're just to be selfless. But that, in fact, is not the whole Jewish answer. Because a person who wants nothing usually also does nothing. I'm not going to go into a whole discussion here of capitalism versus communism, but I think that's one of the main, discussions of why communism is not always such a great idea, is because, it takes away the desire of people to accomplish. Because in the end, you can work and work, and everybody else gets the benefit. You don't get your own benefit, and it takes away desires. If I had more time, there's some cute stories from in the early times in Israel when they had kibbutzim. And today the kibbutzim are the biggest capitalists around. It's just a name only, really. They're not so socialist anymore. But there were all kinds of stories when people, took advantage of each other and they worked. It doesn't work so well, right? People, if we want to get out of the bed in the morning and marry and raise children and build communities and learn and work, it's because people want something, want to accomplish something, want to do something. Even when we want to have a relationship with God. We desire, we should love God, whatever. So the question isn't simply whether desire is good or bad. The question is, what do you desire? What do I want it? What am I willing to do in order to get it? Who am I willing to run over in my way to to achieve what I want to get? What happens to other people? And perhaps is the desire serving me, or have I begun to serve the desire? That's another way of framing it. That's an issue. So for tonight, it's a huge topic, but let's talk basically about three basic ideas. Okay, first of all, Judaism doesn't ask us to become people without desires, like we said, and secondly, it does ask us not to build our happiness based on what belongs to somebody else, right? We should build our happiness on what's ours and not what somebody else's or what we think of somebody else's. And third, the highest goal is not merely to suppress those desires that are not right, but to redirect them, to educate and until they begin to line up with what's right. And maybe to underscore this idea, there's a Mishnah everybody knows. It's a very famous Mishnah. Jews know it, non-Jews know it. What's the most famous thing? Probably they quote in the name of Hillel. Right, that's it. Right? If I am not for myself, who is for me? And if I am for myself, then what am I? Then there's the third part. If not now, when? That was like, I think that's the thing that when we decided to come on Aliyah, when we were pushing 60 and I still wanted to come to Israel, that was the one that pushed me more than anything else. If not now, when? If I'm not going to go now, I ain't going to go. So that happened. But that's a separate discussion. But these two, it may not lead me, it may not the money. If they're the two extremes that Hillel is rejecting. Right? He doesn't tell me that I have no leads. If I have to stand up for myself, if I don't stand up for myself, who's not? I have responsibilities for my health, for my livelihood, for my development, for my family, and I have to take care of those things. But if my entire world is only for me, right, then what am I? Well, who am I? I'm meant to have a self, but not to be imprisoned by that self. I'm supposed to be larger than that. Okay, so that's a useful definition. So I want to begin the discussion. I always try to bring in a little bit of Parshat HaShavua. This is whoever wants, by the way, after we conclude here in Seaside in a few weeks and go back home to Israel. I do publish a weekly Parshat Shavua class usually. And whoever would like to get those, let me know, and I'd be privileged to add you to my list of people I send it to. But it's usually something to do with Parshat HaShavua, which is the Torah reading. And as a rabbi, you see one of the things that you see, oh, there's always something to do with Parshat HaShavua and whatever it is that's going on. And this one's no exception. This week, the Parshat Shavua is Shoftim.
You do it every week
I do it every week.
for each portion?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes something happens, but generally, unless something, I do it every week.
Sure, so you send out.
And I send it out. I have a YouTube channel where you can look up all the old ones if you want, and other things, whatever. Okay, so this one of the things we read about in this parsha is the laws concerning a king, right? And it says that the king has, it says very interestingly, it says that the king has a lot of power. However, it says lo yar below, it says nasusi, and lo yar below nashim, and kesef zahav below yar below. He shouldn't have too many horses. He shouldn't have too many wives. He shouldn't have too much money, right? Because if he does so, it'll send him off the deep end. And if you're familiar even a little bit with Jewish history, this was something that was a problem. King David only had 18. That was 18 wives. He limited himself to that. But his son had 1,000. Now that's the wives and concubines and whatever, and how he did that. Who has time? I don't. Most of the men here can't even understand how he can handle more than one wife. But that's maybe it's easier to handle three wives than one wife. That's what it says somewhere. They keep each other busy. I don't know, but whatever he shouldn't have too many. So the thing is lo yar below. He shouldn't have too. Not that he shouldn't have. He shouldn't have too many. What's too many? That sounds like a relative statement. One way of looking at it is that it's not just for himself. Lo yar below. There's one interpretation that he shouldn't make it for himself. It's not the danger isn't just in having it. The danger is acquiring becomes self-expanding. As the Gemara says, Yesh Lamana Rotza Messiah. If a person has 100, they want 200. Kohelet, Ecclesiastes famously says, Ohev Kesef, Lo Yizba Kesef. If you like money, you'll never be satisfied with money. Right? The more you have, the more you want. And if that happens, it says the Torah says his heart will be above his brothers. The king must remember, right, that there are other people. In fact, the ideal king in Jewish terms is not the king. David saw himself as the servant of the people, not the king of the people, and that's really the way it should be. So again, here he has needs. He's supposed to use those needs, but it gets to a point that it becomes too much. So that's a problem. So where does it talk about in the Torah that you're not allowed to? You shouldn't want things that aren't yours. Anybody know where it says that in the Torah? Aseret Hadibro. It's the 10th commandment, right? Thou shalt not covet, right? It says Aseret Hadibro twice. The one more famous in Parshat Yisro, it says lo sachmod, and we read a few weeks ago in Parshat Vayetchanan lo titaveh, right? It says two languages. Now, do not covet. I don't know how many of us ever use the word covet in our normal conversation with people. That you should covet something. Not here we have a the cove. I don't know if that's related to the covet. I don't know, but we shouldn't covet. Uh, no. All right, it's just not working. All right, but it's a little bit of a strange commandment. It means basically I shouldn't want things. Now, what does that mean? Like if I see somebody drive by in a nice Lexus, I say, "Oh wow, that's a beautiful car. I wish I had that." Boom. Have I just transgressed do not covet? If I see that somebody has a really good job and they have a nice position, oh wow, wish I was that. Covet says you shouldn't covet your neighbor's wife. What if he has a beautiful wife and a beautiful marriage? Oh, I wish I had that. Of course I. But right? Is that not covet? So what's it about? Yes, Jeff.
Maybe this is semantic, but there's a difference between there's a difference between wanting something versus wanting something that somebody else has or that somebody else owns. So if my neighbor has a beautiful car and I wish I had that car or the money to buy that car, I'm not necessarily wanting his car, right? I want a car that's like that. It's or whatever.
Okay.
I think that that it's different as far as the neighbor's wife, well, I mean, your point though is there's a difference between like mm, admiring, let's say, their marriage and wanting a relationship like that versus wanting her, you know.
Okay. All right. So you're saying if there's more, he has a the Lexus, and I also want a Lexus. That's not as much of a problem. You're saying. In fact, we'll see later that when it gets to the halacha, the Aruch HaShulchan says kind of that if I want something that there's plenty of, I just want it also. That's a much less of a problem. But generally speaking, we're talking about things that are unique, one of a kind. The person's wife or the person's house or the person whatever, that I want that one, right? And that's a real problem. So but again, how could the Torah legislate for me not to want something? It's just sort of, I didn't, just I see it, I want it, boom. At what point did I violate the trip? Let's say, be honest, I really would like a person. Let's talk about, of course, not me, but a single person. Sees this beautiful woman. I wish she was my wife, and she's probably she's married to somebody else, right? If a person says that and he's daydreaming, is he transgressed that just by having that thought?
All this, maybe you're gonna get to it, maybe we put it on the side, but one of my first thoughts with them hearing this, how does this whole concept of desire and want, balance out with sameach b'chalto?
We're going to get to that. That's a good point. That's a good point. So why don't you sit over there? I mean, there's no point in you to be hiding behind there. Okay. All right. So, okay. So the Rambam looks at these things and he gives a very good answer, I think. And he says he distinguishes between the first moment of noticing something attractive and the desire that has begun to take possession of the person. He says there's two things, as I mentioned, lo titaveh, which really doesn't mean covet, it means shouldn't lust after something. So you shouldn't have a desire, lust after something when you begin to plan how I'm going to acquire the thing from the guy. Not just, okay, I want it, but how can I get that person to, sell me that thing? Or how can I pressure them so that they have, and in terrible cases, how can I, and this has of course happened, how can I get him to divorce his wife so that I can have her?
Did you ever
Right?
about King David?
With,
What he did.
with King David, with with Bathsheba, with Uriah. That's a very important question. Time doesn't permit tonight to go into that story and know everything about it, but yeah, that's a difficult issue. And furthermore, and then there's lo tachmod is not only he says, the Rambam says, going to take it to the next step. When I begin to pressure the owner, I perhaps pressure him directly, through friends, through repeated requests, other tactics, until the owner finally gives in and sells it to me. And this can come in a lot of places. There's so many questions that come up with this. Usually people don't think about it so much because they think about, even when people who are serious about trying to observe halakha and keep business, proper. But we people they figure, if I really pressure the other guy to sell it to me, well, that's just business. If you want to buy a house and you pressure him and he come in again and you offer this and you offer that, then you put that thing. Or sometimes even the questions come up. You may or may not know, but in the yeshiva world, there are a lot of pressure to, that if a young man who wants to study for years, so he wants, to be supported by his in-laws. I'll let you go out with my son if you agree that you're gonna give him at least this much money and this, that, and this, that. Is that a problem of Los Achma, or is that okay? Is that, normal? I don't. All these are questions. I'm not going to determine the answers to these things, but those are the questions that come up. Okay. So, in other words, the Torah is not saying it's wrong to notice beauty or success or comfort. It's just saying that danger begins when the thought changes from "I would like it" to "I have to have it," and I'm going to try to do and figure out how I'm going to get it away from that person. Like you're saying, Jeff. That's when it becomes a real problem. Because the problem is not only that the violation, but the problem that person begins to disappear. right? It's no longer and I don't really care about that person and what they have. And it's interesting that the place that the Rambam, who's very, very particular about, his order of the way he puts things in Mishnah Torah is unbelievable, and how he puts things in an order way. He puts these laws in the laws of gzela, of theft, right? It's like the first step towards get, because it's the beginning of a process in which desire can erase the boundary between, two human beings. And he in fact says, I'll read you his words, right? Hatava mevili de chimud, hachimud mevili de gezel. That once, if you desire something, that leads to coveting, and coveting leads to eventually to trying to steal it. If I can get it, pressure, fine, and if I can't get it, I can't. And I may even pressure in a very, very strong way. In fact, one of the early, what happens if I pressure him and I pay for it, right? And is that okay? Because after all, I paid for it. But in fact, we find pretty early on in the Torah that's a big problem. I don't know. The first time this appears in the Torah is way back in the time of Noah, in the time of the flood. It says what one of the things that happened was Vatimale haaretz chamas. The land became full of Hamas. Now, that's not the Hamas that we're unfortunately all too familiar with. Hamas there means that they used to have forced sales. They would say, that's your car. I want your car. Here's $1,000, and now it's my car. I'm going to make you an offer. You ain't going to refuse. It's going to be able to. They even so people, but that's in a sense worse than stealing it, because when you stole it, at least maybe you still think you did something wrong. Here, I paid for it. Yeah, okay, so I'm a tough bargainer, but there's nothing. I didn't do anything wrong. I took it. I paid for it. It's fine. But that's certainly a problem of lo sachno.
That's Hamas, Hamas means for sale
Yeah, in that context, yeah,
or that.
right. Really, the Hamas, who you're familiar with today, is an Arabic word, not a Hebrew word. They call themselves Hamas. Okay, but Hamas, we find it means sort of in other places in Megillat Esther, it appears a few times there. It means anger. They're angry people. Corruption. Okay. Um, okay.
Even like Nazi in Hebrew means something.
Nazi, that in Hebrew also means naitz is, yeah, it's interesting. Okay.
That's the word.
It's related to a Hebrew word. Okay, anyway, so there are complicated halachic questions about all these things, about bargaining, fundraising, repeated invitations, sales pressures, negotiations, right? Those are all the moral warning is clear. The word no has to mean something. And if somebody says no, they don't want to do it, then you have to respect that, and you can't keep pushing them. And you have to accept their no. Sometimes you have to push people. If Zev didn't push people to come on Shabbos, we would never have a minyan, right? But there's a line past which where it's okay and where it's not okay, and that's and those are things. There's another story. What?
Encourage. Well,
Okay. There's another biblical story which also you may be familiar with. It comes out later with the king Achav, right? Several generations later, where he was the king, but there was this guy Navot who had a beautiful vineyard, and he wanted it, and he wasn't selling, it wasn't for sale, and eventually he wanted it so much that he ended up his wife Jezebel arranged a false accusation so that Navot was killed, and he took it. And the famous words were Haratzachta gan yarashta. Not only you killed him, you also want to inherit it from him. It was, that's a terrible thing. So, but in normal life, let's say something is for sale, right? Normal to make an offer, to bargain, ask whether the owner would consider a different price. But then when the owner said no, and I refuse to let that answer stand, and I call again, I recruit a friend, when is it happen? When is the process clean? And also, let's see, I'm just gonna go a little further here. With competition, let's say you apply for a job or to build a business, or when you want to learn from somebody else's excellence, that could be legitimate. But when you quietly spread a rumor and engineer something so that the other person loses it so that you can have it, obviously that's not good. It might be not every improper act is los achmod, but we have an issue. Okay. But this one central to the idea of how to understand this properly, there's a very famous statement by the Ibn Ezra where he puts it in a way that's very often quoted in this context. He asks the famous question directly. He says an interesting question that the God does not give us challenges that we cannot handle. It's an interesting concept. That if a person has a certain challenge, that means God knew that this person could handle it. And some people go through difficult things in life. We know, I know some people here, but I know everybody has their challenges in life, and some things that they go through are very difficult. But one of the basic matter of faith is that if God gave me that challenge, I can handle it. It may be difficult to handle it, but I can handle it. But he says, Torah doesn't give us a challenge that we can't handle. And again, the question is, if as soon as I see it, I desired it, boom, I transgress it. That can't be. So how does he say? He gives us an analogy, a parable. He says, imagine that there was a king. The kings used to every so often, they didn't appear on TV so that their people would see them in the more distant provinces. They would occasionally go out and visit the provinces, and months in advance. Oh, the king is coming, and we'll make a big deal. Okay, and finally the king comes and to the main village in that area, and from all the surrounding villages, all the people came to see the king, and the royal carriage comes in, and there's a guy there, a villager, who's a farmer. He's got a couple of pots, and he's a very not doesn't have very much to his name, and he's a simple person. And he sees as the carriage passes, he sees inside the beautiful princess who's accompanying her father along with the journey, right? The question that Evan Ezra says is, would he now in his mind start thinking, maybe I could go out with her and maybe she'd marry me, right? Would he entertain that thought? Well, okay, everybody has fantasies, and maybe he'd have a fantasy that she would want, but would he actually seriously think that she's? Of course not, because she's out of his league by times a million, right? He's got no money, he's got no background, he's got no this, he's that. He's just a simple nothing, nobody, right? The princess is never going to consider him, right? See, he says it's like thinking about that. Well, there's Aladdin, but that's unusual. So he had a magic carpet, but this guy has nothing, right? So it's like basically he's desiring that he would have he says wings and fly. It's not going to happen. So he says that a person should learn to see somebody else's property in the same way, right? That if somebody else owns something, it's sacred to them, and I have as little connection with that person's car, let's say, or wife certainly, or whatever it is, as the pauper with the princess. It's not going to happen. He wouldn't have a desire. And even though in real life we might have that, you should work on yourself to see that if another person owns this, has this, if that person has that marriage, the person has that possession, that job, position, it's sacred to them. It's not something that I have any relationship with. It doesn't mean I can't work to improve my circumstances. And it's not the idea that you should tell somebody just accept who's poor or sick, alone, mistreated. You shouldn't do anything, just accept your portion and do nothing. That's not what it means, right? There's a large difference between I want to build a happier marriage and I want that person's spouse, or I want to find work that uses my abilities and I need to take that person's position. Those are different things, right? That's the difference over here. Okay. Still, we might say, that's all very nice, but feelings are feelings. If I want something, I want it. What am I going to do? So the Beis Halevi, whose name was Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, he was the grandfather of Soloveitchik, who you may have heard of, right? He gave an interesting example. He says, and he talks about this in the context of Europe where he lived. Imagine that a person was really hungry. They were starving. They hadn't eaten in a day or two, and they were really, really hungry. And they see across the river there's somebody giving out food, right? In those days, the rivers, in the winter froze over, and He says, and he starts to thinking he's going to run across the river and get some food. And suddenly his foot slips, and he thinks, "Uh-oh, the ice is starting to break." At that moment, is he thinking about the food? No, no way, right? He's not thinking about the food. He's thinking about only one thing. He's full that he might fall, and the thought of the food completely leaves him, right? He says that's how we should think also about somebody else's things. Not concentrate on that. Concentrate on my Yirat Shamayim. Concentrate on doing the right thing, right? And then we so irresistible that it seemed irresistible a minute ago. Now it's unimportant. I think I can relate to this a little bit. There's a famous a statement by the Rebbe of Kotsk, that who talks about the difference between Yom Kippur and Tisha B'av, right? Say they both of them are a long fast day, both 24-hour fast. Was there a difference? He says there's a difference. Says it in Yiddish, it sounds better, but I'll try to translate it anyway. He says on Yom Kippur, wer will essen? Who would want to eat? On Tisha B'av, wer kann essen? On Tisha B'av, who could eat? In other words, on Tisha B'av, it's such a sad day. What's the day eat? Who would think about food? And on Yom Kippur, if you experience it properly, when coming to Ne'ilah, the last thing you're thinking about is having a sandwich. But you're so into the spirit of what's going on at that time that food is that's who would want to eat. That's such a thing. Unfortunately, there are people who they don't experience Yom Kippur that way, and all they can think about is what they're eating. So they don't get it. They haven't had a good Yom Kippur. They haven't understood what it's about. If we can focus, it depends on how we focus. That we understand. We sometimes lose the our perspective, and that's what the Beis Halevi is trying to say. In a related kind of way, I remember there was a famous rabbi in New York, Rav Shimon Schwab, who was the rabbi in Breuer's after our Breuer, and he became whatever. Without going into who he was a great speaker, a great rabbi, and he once spoke at a convention, and he said he was known for being Mr. Integrity, Mr. Everything has to be done properly, and he said that when people sometimes, unfortunately, one of the things that Jews are unfortunately susceptible to is being a little bit funny with their business practices and cutting corners when it comes to honesty or integrity, and even in the religious community, unfortunately, that happens all too often. So he says when a person feels that they're being they're not their business practices, that they're cheating in business, that they're lying to people, that they're not representing. Do you think that the problem is that they're violating the prohibitions against stealing and business trafficking? They said that's not the main problem. The main problem is that they're a heretic. Why? Because if they really believed in God and they believe that God gives them what they're supposed to have, so why would they ever enter their mind that by cheating, God is going to help them, get the parnasa that they need, get the money that they need? You can only think that if you don't think that God's in control. If you think God's in control, it would never be into your mind to steal or to lie to get money because it's not going to work. If God doesn't want you to have it, you ain't going to have it. So that's kind of goes to over here with desire. You desire and try to get something from somebody because it's a problem if you're not really having it properly. Okay, and this happens all the time. So, when sometimes, let's say, we're involved, we're angry at somebody, and all of a sudden you hear the phone rings and you hear jarring news, and you forget about this thing, right? Our perspective has to be proper in what we think about. Okay. And then that brings us to what you were mentioning before, Zev, which is that it says, in Pirkei Avot, Ezuhu Ashir Hasameach B'chalko, who is truly a wealthy person, who somebody who's satisfied with their lot. Okay, so there's a problem that they say that a lot of people say, yes, of course, I'll be happy when I have my lot. I don't have my lot yet. When I get my lot, then I'll be happy, right? But when I finally get that house, when I finally get that income, when I finally get that level of relationship or retirement that I think it should be mine, then I'll become satisfied with Bechelko. But if you're always worried about the next achievement, it never arrives because there's always something coming. Being happy with one person doesn't mean that you should believing that the present should never change. Of course, it means things could be better, but it's refusing to treat the present as worthless. Knowing if my life right now is that's what God wants me right now, right? And it may be the big things will change in the future, and that's great, but not be satisfied if this is what God wants for me right now, that's what it's supposed to have. It's a person with a healthy sense of ambition can say two things at the same time. They can say, I'm grateful for what I have, and also working towards something better. That's fine, no problem with that. But they're not opposite. Unhealthy is because I don't have what I want, so nothing counts. Or because somebody else has more, I have less. Who would we find in the Torah, in the Bible that had that? The most classic case was Haman, right? He was literally the man who had everything. He was fabulously wealthy. He had at least 10 sons. He and a daughter. The Midrash said he had more. He had a beautiful house. He was the most powerful person in the world, basically. When he walked down the streets, right, everybody would bow down to him. What more could a man want? But what happened? One Jew, one Yiddish, wouldn't refuse to bow down to him, right? That one guy, I have nothing. And he got consumed with what he doesn't have. It sounds crazy, but we all know people like that. What they have is not, it's what the other guy has that bothers them. You know, and it may be that the object isn't really what we want. It could be that I want the status it gives me, right? Or the proof that it gives me the proof that I'm not mine. It's an interesting question. I saw somebody put it this way: if nobody else could see that I had that Lexus, right? Right? It can never be posted, never admired. I can never tell anybody about it. Would I still want it better more than my Chevrolet? Is it just, is it because it's really wanted because it's that much more comfortable? I want everybody to see me driving around in the fancy car, right? Sometimes the answer is yes, and maybe there's a genuine need. Maybe it's healthy, but all too often, it's not. It's how it's seen in somebody else's eyes. Okay, so let's look very briefly at the other side of this title, which is, what was the other side of the title? That is it okay to have? I forgot what it was.
Good.
What was the other side of the title?
It was desire versus selfishness in Judaism.
Okay, desire versus selfishness. Okay, no, the second part,
Selflessness.
selflessness. Okay, all right.
We needed to thank Trish for bringing up the subject.
Thank you, Trish. Okay, thank you, Trish, for the subject. Okay, um, so, what's the answer? Are we supposed to be selfless? Are we supposed to deny ourselves pleasure and etc.? Rambam explicitly rejects that, right? He says that a person is. He just says that a person shouldn't say. I'll read it to you. He shouldn't say Lo yamar adam ho'il v'hakina v'hatava v'hakavod derek ra'in. Since it's not good to have jealousy and lust, so maybe I should stay away from it. I shouldn't eat meat. I shouldn't drink wine. That's also not good. A person shouldn't do that. A person shouldn't deny themselves legitimate pleasures in this world. In fact, the Talmud, the Yerushalmi says, "Atid adam litain din cheshbon al kol ma shera'ita, shera'ita ino lo v'lo achal." A person is going to have to answer for if he had the opportunity to enjoy this world and he didn't have so. Lonni knows what I'm about to say, which is there's a famous quote from Rav Hirsch, right? He said that when we get up before them pearly gates someday, right? There's a Gemara that says we're going to have a couple of questions they're going to ask us. Were you honest in business? Did you learn Torah regularly? Did you try to have children? Did you look for the final redemption? He said another question I forget. So he says one of the questions he said they're going to ask you, "Hast du gesehen meine Schweiz?" in German. Did you see Switzerland? Right? In other words, did you appreciate the beauty of nature? Did you go to seaside? Did you see the beautiful things that there are in the world? Hashem put them there because he wants us to enjoy the world. He doesn't want us to go away from the world, right? Of course, we also have fasting, we have restraints, we have discipline, and a person who's controlled by alcohol has to abstain completely. Somebody who's spending and destroying their family has to have limits, right? But in general, we're supposed to have a healthy relationship with pleasure. What's the main response that we have to this? the main thing is we're supposed to make a bracha. We were talking before we found the mouse about them making different blessings, right? A bracha basically doesn't say the food is evil. The bracha is saying recognize it comes from God. I'm not its absolute owner, right? And like he gave it to me, so I'll have the energy to do good things, and etc. And those desires should grow. Okay, I'm just gonna cut out a little bit because I want to accomplish something else. And so we have to understand, and I mentioned before that some things are the Aruch HaShulchan goes through what things are okay and what things are not okay to desire. Like Jeff brought the example of the car. I can have like he says like this that for instance, if somebody has a skill, I also want to have that skill. He says that's fine, you know. I can learn from them to have that skill. There's nothing wrong with desiring that. I'm not taking anything away from the other person because I have it also. In fact, the Gemara says, "Kinat sofrim tarvech chokmah," that if the more you're jealous of somebody else who knows more Torah, that's a good thing. Maybe it'll encourage you to learn more. That's okay. A person might want to have a larger income. They could give more charity. They could do more good things. They could, etc. But it's good to be able to dream. Sorry. So the Sfas says that the answer to lower desires is not only to keep saying no, but you should develop your sort of a little bit like the Ibn Ezra, but you should decide what are the important things to me. Is really what I want in life a bigger car, a bigger house, a bigger this, a bigger job, or is what I want is to accomplish great things, to do great things for the world, to come closer to God, to learn more Torah, to do great things for the Jewish people. That's the to control the things that you want. To look at the desires that you have shouldn't be for lower things. It should be for higher things. And if you're able to do that, then you're able to accomplish. And that's part of maturity, right? That when like a little child, he said, they want it. I want this. I want that. I want that. As we mature, we should raise what are the things that we want out of life. And certainly as we get older and we know we don't have as much time left to accomplish those things, but we should change what we want, and what kind of person we're going to be. So just to conclude, I guess there are some questions we can ask ourselves, which are, what do I really want? Is my desire attached to somebody else's particular possession or life, or can I have that thing without that person? If I want something that somebody else has, can that person freely say no or not? And can I be grateful before I receive it? Right? Are all my am I happy with what I have now, that even if I don't have that other thing, I should be happy with my lot as I have it? And what larger good will this serve to have this new thing? So those are all, questions of when I desire things, and I have to go through some of the thoughts about that. And when I send out this, I'll try to send out a little bit with some of these questions summarized. And now I want to have a special presentation, if we could. And my dear wife Lonni is here. She actually gave a related talk in Portland, where we were recently for Shabbat, and she has some things to offer us.
Hi, everyone who's on the screen. Hi, everyone who's here. I just thought we thought maybe bring like one or two, time permitting, practical examples of how to handle a situation in which one just feels jealous. And like we were saying, it's very, very normal. And most people feel that at some point or another. Um, I had like a source sheet. I can actually give out a source sheet. You want to give it to the people who are here. We don't have time to look at all of it, but if you look at source number 10.
You're on the screen.
Okay, yeah.
Is that
Oh, okay. Source number 10. So source number 10, it says later excerpt. A person may speak as though he is happy or grateful for another's good fortune, while inwardly his heart feels bad. This is very common. Even people who are not dominated by jealousy are not entirely free of it, especially when someone in the same profession succeeds, and all the more so when that person succeeds more than they do. So, since it's such a common issue,
You need it?
Oh.
so I thought maybe we would visit a scenario or two and see how maybe there's some tools to deal with these kinds of feelings. So one scenario is a couple who went away for Shabbat. They have a family, and they spent Shabbat with a family whose home and children and religious life appear to be perfect. Everything appears to be perfect. And they return home, and the children are well mannered. They get along with each other. They don't seem to fight. They sing it. They stay at the table during the Shabbat meal. They sing together. They're perfectly dressed. The house is perfectly in order. Everything seems, and they come back to their own home. Right. They return to their own home, and they're very, very dissatisfied. The, the dishes from last week are still in the sink, and the house is not particularly clean, and the kids are fighting, and when they sit down at the table, even though they've been taught to say thank you and please, they don't usually say that when they have a Shabbat meal. The kids can't get away from the table fast enough, and they feel very dissatisfied with their present circumstances and kind of envious of the family that they just spent Shabbat with. So the question is how do they approach these feelings, and how can they turn them into positive approaches, and how can they deal with it in a positive way, and what our Jewish sources have to say about that? So I think first of all, I mean, we can speak of Jewish sources, but there's also just common sense. I think most people would agree that it's very bad. Comparisons are not a good thing. As much as you can, avoid comparisons. Avoid comparing yourself with others. That's not what life is meant to be. And we'll look at a couple of sources that can strengthen that conviction. But if inevitably, like Rabbi was saying, sometimes there's just feelings you have and you can't help it, and started you've already started down that path of comparing yourself with others. So then maybe the next step would be to see, okay, I'm feeling this envy, this jealousy, or this coveting, as we say. Is it a good jealousy or a bad jealousy? We could call a good jealousy, the rabbi mentioned earlier, there's the last source, and the Gemara says, Kinat sofrim tarbeh chachma. Jealousy among scholars increases wisdom. So sometimes you can turn some jealousy into a good aspiration. It can help you to think about, well, maybe there's something I can do about being where that family is, or doing what is it that I can change so that I am at that place that I would like to be. So sometimes it can fuel growth. You can focus on different ways to achieve what they have. And it might be that maybe you could learn from them certain ways to educate your kids, certain ways to bring them up, things to say or not to say. Maybe it can spur you to good things. So if it's that kind of a jealousy, if there's something that good can come from it, you can grow in certain ways. So direct it in that way. That's one very positive way to channel these difficult feelings. Um, but even good jealousy, so to speak, is often tinged with some bad jealousy. You might wish those other people ill. I hope that things don't. Secretly, you might be happy if you hear that, oh, their kids really aren't doing so well. See that they're not so perfect, or you hear that one, you see one of the kids acting out, one of those perfect kids, and you're happy that, oh, okay, that family isn't really so perfect. And you're not happy with feeling those kinds of feelings. You don't really want to feel negative about other people. So, and I think we all know that. We know that really jealousy is bad for us. It's not, it doesn't, if you look at source one, I would have somebody else read it, but it doesn't work with this thing. Anybody else want to read source one? Okay.
Rabbi Elazar Kapar says, jealousy, desire, and pursuit of honor remove a person from the world.
Okay. So it removes us from the world. What does that mean? That the we're focusing now on jealousy, as in lo sachmo, do not covet. What does that mean? It removes us from the world. It doesn't say that you will be punished. It doesn't say, it just says it removes you from the world.
You're not enjoying the present.
Yeah. You're not enjoying.
This thing.
Yeah, you're being eaten up inside. Or like example, source number 3 from Mishlei, from Proverbs. Any volunteer to read, or anybody online want to read? I don't know how to unmute them. Just click on it.
I'll read. Number which
Okay.
one?
3.
3. A tranquil heart gives life to the body, but jealousy is the rottenness of the bones.
Yeah.
Wrath is cruel and anger overwhelming, but who can stand before jealousy?
Okay. So how do you think that jealousy is worse than anger? Why is it that who can stand before jealousy if it's the worst of all of them?
With genuine jealousy, I've always understood it as
That could speak loud enough so that people can hear you on our computer.
okay, so jealousy generally has a component of wanting something not necessarily good for the other person. It's not like you just desire to be learned or desire to have shallow bias like somebody else. In jealousy, there's a negative connotation, at least I always thought that you're jealous of that person. It's almost like there's an adversary thing, like you wish they weren't in such a good
Right.
place.
Right. Exactly.
And you yourself would prefer to be in that place and in a better place. You'd like to almost not exactly change positions, but you're not thinking of them in a positive way. You're thinking of them as something they have and you don't have. It's almost if they're involved in somehow depriving you of what you don't have.
Yeah.
So you're thinking negative. It's not just you want the thing, but you are not happy that they have it.
Right. 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 Exactly.
So that's a real negative way to approach your fellow person
Hmm.
is to want that for them. I mean, depends how you take it.
Right. Right. So then very often those kinds of feelings, first of all, anger is a reaction to something that happens usually, but it might dissipate. But this jealousy is kind of the situation remains the same, and it can start to cause rottenness of the bone to eat you up inside because and you end up very often resenting that other person and sometimes wishing that wishing bad for them or being happy if something negative happens to them. And here, for example, source 10, the first paragraph.
Just for one thought. I mean,
Mhm.
when jealousy there's a sense of bitterness, it's not only something that having negative thoughts perhaps about that other person, but you're kind of living with your life. You're
Yeah.
unsatisfied with what you have. You feel to be satisfied, you need what somebody else has, and if you look at life that way, that you're always looking at things that are beyond who you are at the moment in a way that you're bitter about it, will separate you from the world, because the world is so much to offer.
Right, and you can't
And if you're
enjoy it.
bitter about your situation, you see the world through bitter eyes, you miss the boat.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
miss the beauty of it.
Exactly. So here is it. Mesilas Yesharim says just what you're saying in the source 10. Says that jealousy is a lack of understanding and foolishness. Anybody online want to read it? Right. Guess it's faster to just go ahead. The jealous person gains nothing, causes no loss to the person he envies, and only harms himself. There's nothing to be gained from it. It doesn't bring you anything. Just eats away at any enjoyment you have in life. or like the Orchos Tzadikim in source 11, the last one, source 11. Anyone want to read?
First thing.
The last one, it says 14:9.
In
Everyone finds a
everyone
pleasant.
finds a pleasant taste. Food, except the jealous person cannot savor his food until his fellow's good fortune has disappeared.
Okay, so you can't enjoy life because you're so eaten up with being upset what the other person has and starting to resent the other person. And like you were saying, Zeb, before we said jealousy takes you out of the world because you don't have a world. You don't have a world in which you're happy and satisfied and striving. You just end up being consumed by this and it eats you up inside. And it's I think most of us, if I'm sure the very righteous people in this room who maybe never felt that way, but most people, if they do, they're not happy with feeling that way. They wish they could get rid of it. And so we just look as a age. Age helps. Get you mellow, right? Yeah, yeah. You realize maybe how does age help?
I don't know, but I feel like I don't feel as jealous as I used to.
Uh-huh.
You can say over the cuspids.
The
Cuspids, really don't. To the top of the cup.
Oh, right. Rabbi saying that the Kutzker Rebbe said that the first source that we read, Akina v'hatava v'hakavod, that jealousy, desire, and the pursuit of honor remove a person from the world. So he says they represent different stages of life. That the earlier part of life is more defined, or we're more likely to feel jealousy. Like children, it's mine. You want everything. You're more self-centered. The world revolves around you more. And then as a child grows up and we move from youth towards adulthood, so there's a more desire, more lust, physical desires, lust. And then as we age even more, then the pursuit of honor becomes wanting to this pursuit of wanting to be honored, to be respected, to feel you're looked up to by other people. That becomes a dominant force, let's say, in the later in a later stage of life, hopefully a long one. But so they're different at different stages of life. We have different challenges. So that's how he defines um, those three categories. So that's very interesting that you say that because well, I think also as you age, your values change, your perspective changes, and things that maybe would have gotten you so upset before, you realize it doesn't last forever. Things change. You have a more mature and a broader perspective. I think that was, yeah.
I was thinking of Phil just for the move. Yeah. But I think as you age, you also put a different level of importance.
Mm.
What's important becomes evolves.
Yes. Uh-huh.
In a significant way.
Yeah, for sure. Uh-huh. Hopefully in a mature and wise way. Yeah, but yeah.
I mean, why other indication, hopefully.
Oh, wisdom, right. Absolutely.
I'm from Shiva. I mean, the Rebbe would say, boing, boing.
Another white hair.
Okay.
Okay, so assuming that we do have feelings of jealousy, envy, or even Mesilas Yesharim says one of the main sources of envy is wanting honor. So it's a kind of a combination of jealousy and pursuit of honor, which we said often becomes more important in later life. He says it's one of the main sources of jealousy is someone is not receiving the honor that you feel you deserve, or seeing someone else get an honor that you feel you deserve. So that would be another example. Let's say somebody was supposed to be, worked for an organization for many years and should have been honored at the annual dinner. And then someone who came along newer and just made more noise gets the honor. And that, the person, let's say it was Sarah, and if Sarah feels that she was skipped over, and maybe very likely rightfully so. So how does she deal with those feelings? In a similar way that we were saying, how does that family, that couple deal with seeing another family being what they would like to be? So I think this is a sort of a three-pronged approach to that, and then we'll end with that. One would be, which I think was mentioned earlier, source 8. And Zoma says, "Who is wealthy? One who rejoices in his portion." So one step, if one is feeling resentful, feels skipped over, and starting to resent the person who has what they wish they had, is to just first of all look at what you do have, appreciate what you have. First of all, look around and see all the wonderful things that you have, because especially if it's related to what you're envious of, like in the case of the family. So if they could come back and look around and say, look, we have so much to be grateful for. We have a family, they're good kids, they're healthy. First count your blessings and really appreciate what you have. Because no matter what, there'll always be people who have more than you. And there'll also be people who have less than you. And as high, and unless you're the Olympic gold medalist, you're the best swimmer in the world. Even then, by 2 seconds, next year someone can can steal your record. So you're not.
I'm asking you,
Yeah,
is that what?
yeah, right. So just look at the rest of your life and don't focus on that one thing that you lost in. Um, and the second would be an ayin tova, which is a good eye. And the opposite of a good eye is similar. It's on source 2. Rabbi Yeshua says, an evil eye, the evil inclination and hatred of other people remove a person from the world. So the evil eye is looking at people in a negative way, in a jealous way. So then this ayin hara, ayin hara is viewing people with a narrow vision, with wanting, desiring what they have and being envious of them and being unhappy with them and wishing negative for them. So the suggestion is to the opposite of that is ayin tova, and the Pirkei Avos brings it in another place where we don't have time to go into it, but it says to view other people with an ayin tova, with a good eye. I think it is actually here. Um, yes, number 9. Anybody want to read number 9?
No,
Okay.
Pirkei Avos. Sure. Whoever possesses 3 qualities is among the disciples of Avraham Avinu: a good eye, a humble spirit, and a modest habit.
Okay, so those are the opposite of the ones we saw before. So ayin tova is a good eye, viewing people with a good eye, just being happy for them. Now, and that may not be so easy. I remember I had an aunt, Betty, who was a tzadikah. She was very righteous, and her husband, her husband was extremely sick. He was in the hospital, and he was really days away from death. And I was with her when we got the news that my niece, who was her great niece, had her first child. And I could not believe my aunt. She got so excited. She was just squealed with delight. She was so happy for my niece. And I just looked at her in astonishment. Her husband is dying there. And she herself never had children. And she was just so happy for other people. I once asked her about it, and she didn't really understand the question. She said, "Well, why wouldn't I be happy for someone else?" So that's the way she was. So the idea is to refine our characters to the extent that we do want to wish other people, we wish well for other people, and if we don't feel that, then Sefer HaChinuch suggests acharei ha'pa'ulot nimshachin ha'levavot, that our lots of times our heart follows our actions. That even if we don't feel anything, it doesn't mean we should act insincerely, but we should try to do something let's say that we're resentful of that person, we should try to do something to help that person. Or let's say in the situation where someone else is being honored and I'm feeling very resentful of that person who's being honored. Try to do something for them or try to see that there's something missing in their life that maybe you could help with. And automatically, if you give to another person, you end up feeling closer. You end up with more positive feelings for that person. Like we know the root of ahava, of love, is the hav, which in Hebrew also means to give. And when you give, then you end up feeling more connected, more positive about that person.
That's
And
how so many things, like for example, if somebody's sick, you want to be better and be healthier. You pray for somebody else,
yes,
right? The
right.
idea is that when you give somebody else, God gives back to you, so to speak.
Right, right. It's even said that if you pray for someone else and you need the same thing, that you will be given that thing.
You start with training yourself.
Yes, training yourself.
Uh, for your fellow person and training yourself to want good for somebody else,
Right.
even before yourself. I mean, that's an interesting concept that you think about others and giving to others and their welfare. So that everything else is about, helping others because, for no necessary reason except there's somebody else in need.
Yeah, right. And if you don't feel, and if you start to do it, then if you do it enough, automatically, yeah, it becomes habit, and then it becomes part of you. It becomes how you think of yourself and how you define yourself. And lastly, a tool for combating the jealousy and other negative feelings is emunah, is bitachon, is trust in Hashem. Or as my daughter Didi put it, she said she heard from others. She said, "Stay in your lane." Like we were saying before, there's no comparison. You have your lane in life, and just stay in your lane and take care of what you have to in your lane. Like the example that we said before of the peasant who's not jealous of the princess. It's a different existence. It's a different reality. Similarly, you should feel about whatever lot Hashem has provided with you in life, whatever your path is, whatever your trajectory is, that's divinely ordained. You, of course, make moral choices, but the situation, the circumstances you were born in, the mazel that you have, the way things work out, your strengths, your weaknesses, your health, your challenges, your circumstances. That's all meant to be just for you. And there's a story of that Rabbeinu Bachaya says that when the soul comes down to this world, it doesn't really want to leave. It's very happy up there in heaven. It has to be convinced to come down. It says there's so much pain and evil in the world that why would the soul want to come down here? It's very happy up there. So Rabbeinu Bachaya says that the neshama, the soul, is taken, and it's shown what will happen in its life. And ideally, if it's a life of growth, it will see all its challenges and the journeys it has to go through and the ups and downs. But ultimately, it will see that the soul grows through it, and that it will accomplish its purpose in this world, and it agrees to come down to this world. So, meaning that we each have our own path, we each have our own unique challenges, and whatever is happening to that other person, that's because that's part of that person's path in this world, that their journey. Your journey is different. Your challenges are different. Your life is different. So it's another lane, and it doesn't have to do with you. And
But you also say instead of substance having jealousy, substituting inspiration. You see somebody else who's really succeeded in learning, or you've seen somebody else who's really succeeded in improving their character traits, or how they deal with people. They're in a different lane. You certainly can learn from them and be inspired by them. So somebody else's lane, be an example, could be a teacher, could be a mentor, what to do or what not to do. So
well, that's what we said in the beginning. We said, is it good jealousy or bad? If it's good, if it's going to be inspiring, if it can spur you to growth, then yes. And in that sense, yes, you could look at the other lane and be inspired by it. But if it's bad jealousy, if it's eating you up, if it's making you resentful of the person, if it's not helping anyone, then in that case, you need to remind yourself that essentially the circumstances, the honor that maybe you were denied, that's part of your challenges in life. And if it wasn't meant for you to have that particular thing right now that you want. And just for the last source, I think it says it very well. It's 10, the last paragraph.
Yeah, mine normally.
Somebody online want to read it? Well, they're muted. How do you unmute them all? Oh, Lori, can you unmute?
They can unmute themselves.
Oh, okay. Does anybody want to read that last paragraph? 10?
Right.
Okay.
I can read it. It it doesn't have a number, but the part that says later.
Yes.
Okay. If people understood that no one can touch what has been prepared for another, even by a hair's breadth, and that everything comes from Hashem according to his wondrous counsel and unfathomable wisdom, they would have no reason at all to be pained by their fellows' good fortune.
Okay. So may we merit that kind of character refinement that and help us take us into the month of Elul, which now that we're beginning the new month, it reminds us that Rosh Hashanah is close behind, and it's a time for us to work on ourselves. And the most important thing actually that it said to work on is our midot, our character traits. So may Hashem guide us and in wondrous ways and help us to connect with him. And Elo also means Ani l'dodi v'dodi li. I am for my beloved and beloved it is for me. That we feel that close connection to God, and may it bring us closer to a wonderful and sweet new year. Okay.